The FBI's most wanted list contains the names of criminals who remain fugitives from justice and who are sought to face the consequences of their actions. But they aren't the only FBI files to feature on the list, as it also features a number of cold cases of missing people who mysteriously disappeared and have not been found to this day. The FBI case involving John Tran from Dorchester, Massachusetts, began in 2005 when he mysteriously disappeared and has not been seen or heard from since. The agency is offering a substantial reward of $10,000 for any information on his whereabouts, but to date, it remains a cold case. John was born in Saigon, Vietnam in 1976, but he became a naturalized US citizen living in California. Thereafter, he relocated to Dorchester in order to attend college, where he majored in liberal arts with his sights set on becoming a screenplay writer. During his studies, he worked at a pet supply store and was often seen riding on his bicycle wearing a dark-colored backpack. The last time that he was seen, he was attending a party on Mitchell Street in Randolph, Massachusetts. But no further details on his fate have emerged since that day. He is described as an Asian male with black hair and brown eyes. He is approximately 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighs around 130 pounds. The FBI has stated that they continually re-examine John's case, and any new leads that are submitted will be aggressively followed up on. A close friend of John's, Chin Yuan, has stated that John's family needs closure, and that they're finding it difficult not knowing where he is or what happened to him. They continue to hold out hope that someone will come forward with leads that will help track him down. Anyone with information has been urged to contact the FBI at 1-800-225-5324. Tips can also be submitted electronically at tips.fbi.gov. In March of 2021, Luis Davila from Arkansas traveled to Monterrey, Mexico to visit his girlfriend. But as he was making his way back to the United States, he mysteriously went missing, and no one has seen him or had any contact with him since. His mother says that when he was in Bentonville High School, he was an all-star soccer player. He also loved to travel and had a great love for the outdoors, as he would often go on hikes. On the 29th of March, Luis was driving his silver 2006 Nissan Maxima when he was kidnapped by unknown assailants, and his fate since that day remains an unsolved mystery. The last time he was seen was at a convenience store south of the Mexican border in Nuevo Laredo. The following day, his kidnappers sent a photo that they took of John to his mother. They stated that if she did not pay for his release, that they would end his life. His mother has told police that she complied with the abductors and went as far as to pay them 7 times, but after the 7th payment, they went silent, and she's not heard from them again. Investigators have been unable to find a single trace of John, and his car, cell phone, and work computer have not been located either. The U.S. Department of State has said that there is a travel alert for the area of Nuevo Laredo. The department's Bureau of Diplomatic Security has raised concerns over highway disappearances that are occurring in the city, and they have advised travelers to avoid using the highway between Monterrey and the Texas border. Luis is described as a Hispanic male, standing approximately 5 foot 10 inches tall and weighing 190 pounds with black hair and brown eyes. His family remains in constant contact with the FBI, who is looking at every possible lead to try and track him down, as it's believed that he is still in Mexico. Anyone with information on Luis's whereabouts or the events leading up to his strange disappearance can contact the FBI at 1-800-225-5324. Robert Bob Ellert, a 71-year-old man from Harris, Minnesota, was well known in his area thanks to his involvement with the University of Minnesota Extension, where he was a Chissago County Master Gardener. Bob loved the city of Panama and the Panamanian culture, and so he bought himself a condo in the city in 2005. Despite the fact that he had to undertake a 2-hour drive to the marina where he kept his sailboat, he relished the chance to live in one of his favorite places in the world. Sometime after the 21st of June, 2013, 2 men who were friends of Bob's had been working on his boat, and when they returned to his condo for a visit one afternoon, they found that he wasn't there and his condo was left unlocked. They found this very strange, as the area is not one where people are in a habit of leaving their doors unlocked, and many of the locals in the area have been forced to secure their homes with barbed wire as a security measure. Inside the condo, the 2 men found a broken wine glass, indicating that there may have been a struggle that had taken place. Later, a note was discovered saying that Bob would be gone for 2 weeks. It went on to explain that he would be in the company of a woman named Diane, who would be showing him properties in a remote resort called the Bocas del Toro. Bob's nephew, Doug, and his daughter, Mariah, have raised concerns over the authenticity of the note, as they don't believe that it was actually written by Bob. They say that it doesn't look anything like his handwriting, and have pointed out that it doesn't seem to have been written by a native English speaker. For example, the first line in the note starts with the words "I going" rather than "I'm going." It also includes the phrase "to see some old friend," whereas a native English speaker would write "to see an old friend" or "to see some old friends." Doug and Mariah spoke to locals in the area, and they discovered that Bob had met 2 Colombian women, possibly called Diane and Anna, at a bar called the Havana Club. He also accompanied the women to a soccer game at some point. Doug has stated that Bob's family is growing increasingly concerned since they found out that there have been many instances of Colombian women who take advantage of older men by asking them to look at real estate and then scamming them out of their money. Doug also checked Bob's browser history and found no evidence that he had been looking at properties in the Bocas del Toro area, and even if he had, it would be suspicious, as it's notoriously hard to buy houses or condos in that area. According to the mystery, Doug and Mariah found a receipt from a hardware store showing that Bob had purchased a sledgehammer, carpenter's axe, a pickaxe, and spray paint, and they're at a loss as to why he would have bought those items. Bob's bank accounts have shown no activity since his mysterious disappearance, and his sailboat is docked at the marina. His car, however, has not been found, and to this day, Bob's disappearance remains an unsolved mystery. In January of 2015, April Jean Bailey was living at 45 Lynn Street in Nashua, New Hampshire. On the evening of the 15th of January, she went outside to take out the trash while wearing slippers, black sweatpants, and a black jacket with fur around the hood. But she never came back to the house, and since that night, she has not been seen or heard from by any of her family. They have stated that April wouldn't leave without telling either a friend or a family member, and they find her disappearance even more suspicious since she has 3 children who she would never abandon, even though she wasn't living with them at the time that she went missing. Her family refuses to believe that she left of her own accord, as she hadn't given any indication that she was going anywhere for any period of time. This is evidenced by the fact that her purse and cell phone were found inside the house after she disappeared. A special agent in charge of the FBI Boston Division has stated that the circumstances surrounding April's disappearance are still being actively investigated, and any lead, no matter how small, could help them make progress on the case. Nashua police decided to involve the FBI in their investigation in order to broaden the reach of the search for April, as she is known to have had ties throughout the Northeast, particularly Boston and Glen Falls in New York. Authorities have released a depiction of April, noting that she is Caucasian, 5 foot 3 inches tall, and weighs around 130 pounds. She has long black hair and blue eyes and has 2 tattoos. The first is located on her right shoulder and depicts a butterfly, while the second is the name Damien on her right ankle. Anyone with information on April's case is urged to contact the Nashua Police at 603-589-1663 or the Boston office of the FBI at 857-386-2000. Mother and daughter Mei Yi Wu and Melissa Fu were last seen before their strange and unexplained disappearance at their home in Irvine, California on the 22nd of November 2019. The Irvine Police Department has released very few details on the disappearances, but a press release posted a month after the incident indicated that it was under investigation and that they're looking for any leads that may prove useful in locating them. They also stated that they have developed reasons to believe that the mother and daughter had been kidnapped. Melissa's father told police that on the night in question, there came a knock on the door of their apartment at around 6 p.m., and he went to see who it was. When he opened the door, he saw a man and woman who he described as of Chinese descent standing in the doorway. But before he could ask who they were or what they wanted, he was knocked unconscious by an unknown substance. When he woke up sometime later, he found that both May and Melissa were no longer in the apartment, and he has not seen or heard from them since. When asked if he recognized the couple at the door, he stated that he had never seen them before, but investigators believe that someone in the complex had to have noticed them, though no one has come forward. Melissa's father described the man as in his 40s, around 5 feet 10 inches tall, 190 pounds with an average build, and short black hair. The woman who accompanied him is said to also be in her 40s, approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall with an average build, and her black hair was tied in a bun. It's also believed that they may have been driving or are associated with the black Cadillac of an unknown model. A $10,000 reward has been offered for any information that could help investigators track May and Melissa down. One of the women is described as 5 feet 11 inches tall, 200 pounds, with medium-length dark brown hair and brown eyes. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing a black tracksuit. The other woman is said to be around 5 foot 9 inches, weighs 180 pounds, with medium-length black hair and brown eyes. The last time she was seen, she was wearing a black shirt, black vest, fitted black pants with white writing, and light-colored shoes. In December of 2012, husband and wife, Emmanuel and Kara Lee Williams, became the subjects of an FBI file. Kara was in the last days of her pregnancy while working at a J.P. Morgan Chase Bank in Florida, and Emmanuel had been working part-time as a postal worker. But their respective jobs didn't bring in enough money to pay their bills, and the couple was getting desperate. Adding to their financial woes was the fact that they enjoyed gambling, as is evidenced by the fact that they owned a player card that is given to frequent gamblers at the Hard Rock Casino. And so the couple devised a plan to get themselves back on track by committing a series of bank robberies. Between the 5th of December and 6th of November, they robbed 15 banks in Florida, one of which was located in the Orlando area. During one of the robberies, Emmanuel was seen wearing a hat that's given to player card holders at the casino, and trying in vain to cover a scar on his left thumb. After completing 13 robberies in Florida, the pair decided that they were likely to be caught if they attempted another robbery in the area, and they decided to travel to Kara's home state of Alabama, where they hit 2 more banks. Their instincts had in fact been spot on, as FBI's had been keeping a close eye on them since the last Florida robbery, following them to the casino on a number of occasions. On the 2nd of November, agents obtained warrants to install tracking devices on their 2 cars. 2 days later, Kara walked into the Trinity Bank in Alabama while wearing a disguise and handed the teller a note instructing them to hand her $20, $50, and $100 bills, which they did. 2 days later, Emmanuel used a similar note to rob a credit union in Gulf Shores, and the following day they were finally arrested. After being charged with bank robbery, They both pleaded guilty and were sentenced to 5 and 6 years in federal prison, respectively. In October of 2015, Joseph and Jenny Carrier, a couple from Massachusetts, were wanted by police and the FBI after Joseph entered a bank and informed the teller that he had a firearm and demanded that they hand over any cash they had. The couple then fled in a Buick Encore, which was driven by Jenny. It then came to light that the pair, who had been dubbed Bonnie and Clyde by some media outlets, was also suspected of carrying out similar robberies in Aberdeen, Maryland, Palm Coast, Florida, and Philadelphia. Then, on the 5th of October of the same year, the FBI was alerted to a bank robbery that had taken place at a Citizens Bank in Wilmington, Delaware. Joseph had once again stated that he had a weapon, demanded money, and made off with $2,204 in cash. An alert was put out on police radio, and shortly after, the couple's Buick was spotted by Delaware State Police. With Jenny behind the wheel, they refused to stop and decided to flee instead. A high-speed pursuit followed on the I-95, with Jenny reaching speeds of over 100 miles per hour. Once they were finally stopped, police noticed that the couple had their 7 dogs in the car with them. Joseph confessed to robbing the bank in Wilmington, and Jenny confessed to being the getaway driver. Agents were aided by the couple's family members, as they had concerns over the pair's addiction to illegal substances. One detective commented on the case by saying that the Carrier couple was very troubled, very sick, and feeding a habit. He added that they had not done this for thrills, but rather for profit. They were both charged with bank robbery and aiding and abetting a bank robbery, and were ultimately ordered to pay restitution to the banks that they stole from, while facing possible sentences of up to 20 years in prison. In February of 2016, Brittany Harper and Blake Fitzgerald had become fugitives on the run from the law, but their story would end with a tragic and scary moment that could easily have been avoided. It all started on the 22nd of January, when the couple broke into a house in Joplin, Missouri, where they stole a number of firearms. They then traveled to a hotel in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where they kidnapped a clerk, Kyle Deese, after forcing him into his own car. They then drove about 60 miles to Vestavia Hills, where he was released and his vehicle was abandoned. Deese later told investigators that he spoke to the robbers during his ordeal, and they revealed that they wanted to escape their current lives and get married. After leaving Deese behind, they broke into another home, stealing a Ford Edge and taking a woman hostage. She was also later released in Birmingham. Their next victim was a clerk at a gas station in Perry, Georgia. After robbing the station, they took the clerk hostage, but he too was released shortly after. Following that incident, they traveled to the Florida Panhandle 2 days later, where they committed 2 more robberies. The following day, however, their crime spree came to an end when the Escambia County deputy spotted their stolen vehicle and gave chase. For 30 minutes, he pursued them through Gulf Breeze and over Pensacola Bay, eventually losing them when they abandoned their vehicle near a park in Pensacola. They ended up breaking into a residence on Whitney Drive, where they used the occupant's cell phone to call their parents. Fitzgerald told his mother that if she had not heard from him by 2 a.m., things had gotten bad. After waiting a further 2 hours, they stole the family's car and fled. The homeowner managed to flag down a police officer, and soon deputies were in pursuit. But the vehicle's anti-hijacking system had kicked in, restricting them to 5 miles per hour, and they ended up pulling into another house's backyard. The couple jumped out, and soon a firefight had broken out with Fitzgerald, using Harper as a human shield. He would ultimately lose his life in the incident, with Harper eventually recovering in a hospital. She was left to face the brunt of the law, and was sentenced to 20 years in a state prison after being found guilty on charges of robbery with a firearm, home invasion robbery, false imprisonment, and grand theft auto. In 1977, James Carson was living with his wife and daughter in Phoenix, Arizona, when his wife started noticing strange changes in his behavior that ultimately led her to leave him, taking their daughter with her. Soon after, he began a relationship with a woman named Susan Barnes, and not long after that, they decided to get married. Not long into their marriage, the couple became addicted to illegal substances and started showing an interest in mysticism. During this time, he sent a letter to his daughter in which he explained that he'd been given a new name by God, Michael Bear, and soon Susan changed her name to Susan Bear. In 1981, the couple had been sharing an apartment in San Francisco with an aspiring actress named Karen Barnes. She was later discovered deceased in the apartment's basement after being attacked with a blade, and since evidence suggested that she'd been attacked by someone she knew, the Carsons became prime suspects in the case. They had already fled to a mountain hideout in Oregon, but would later confess to the crime, stating that they had ended her life after deciding that she was a witch. They remained in the hideout until spring of 1982, after which they relocated to Alderport in California, where they worked on a farm. Fellow workers would later describe them as anarchists who predicted that an apocalypse was imminent, brought on by a nuclear detonation. In May of that year, Michael got into an altercation with Clark Stevens, a fellow worker on the farm, and he ended his life. They fled once again, but when the abandoned belongings were searched, detectives found a manifesto that they had written, in which they called for the assassination of then-President Ronald Reagan. In November of 1982, Michael was taken into custody in Los Angeles after he was spotted by an acquaintance while hitchhiking. Unfortunately, due to a police error, he was soon set free and he managed to flee once again. In January of the next year, the couple was picked up by a man named John Charles Hellier while hitchhiking. While on their way to Santa Rosa, Susan decided that the man was a witch and that his life had to be ended. An argument broke out as they traveled on US Route 101 in Sonoma County, eventually turning into a physical fight, causing Hellier to stop the vehicle on River Road. Here, the altercation escalated outside of the car, and during a struggle, Michael ended his life in full view of passing motorists who contacted police. They were soon tracked down, and a high-speed chase ensued, with the couple fleeing in Hellier's vehicle. But they soon lost control of the car and crashed, resulting in both Michael and Susan being arrested. At their trial, the evil couple pleaded not guilty, but they were eventually found guilty of the heinous crimes that they committed, and were sentenced to 25, 50, and 75 years to life for each of their respective crimes. After graduating from the Lovett School in Atlanta, Georgia, Jens Soring attended the University of Virginia, where he met Elizabeth Haysom, with whom he then started a relationship. While on winter break, the couple continued to communicate with each other through letters, Elizabeth stating that she was unhappy with the situation at her family's home. She stated that her parents were drinking excessively and that she hated her father. He responded by saying that if he were to meet them, he had the ultimate weapon that would either drive them insane or give them heart attacks. In 1985, he did finally meet Elizabeth's parents, and they were unimpressed by him, stating that they didn't think he was a good match for her. In a later letter to Soring, she said that they could either wait until they graduated and leave them behind, or get rid of them soon, and the couple opted for the latter. And so on the 29th of March, 1985, the evil couple rented a car and traveled to Washington, D.C., where they spent the weekend before returning to Virginia. 3 days later, Elizabeth received a call informing her that both her parents had lost their lives. When asked about her whereabouts, Elizabeth told investigators that they'd been in Washington, D.C., but the car's mileage showed that they had traveled much further than that, which she explained away by saying they had gotten lost along the way. After repeatedly ignoring requests for fingerprints to be submitted, Soring became a suspect. Despite the fact that an FBI profiler concluded that the crime had been committed by a woman, The couple decided to flee to Paris, France, where they altered their appearances and started using fake names. They were eventually tracked down and extradited to the US, where Soring received a life sentence and Elizabeth was sentenced to 90 years behind bars. Some of the biggest FBI files that remain unsolved mysteries are art heists, and the heist at the Harry S. Truman Presidential Library and Museum in Independence, Missouri is one of the most embarrassing. It took less than a minute for the group of thieves to take what was then $1 million worth of precious artifacts in 1978. More than 40 years later, neither the thieves or the objects have been found. What makes this case so embarrassing is just how little effort was needed to take the artifacts. Presidential libraries don't tend to be the target for major heists, but this one in particular had some incredibly valuable artifacts. A collection of ceremonial swords and daggers were on display behind glass in the museum's lobby. 2 of the swords were gifts from the royal family of Saudi Arabia. The most impressive of these pieces was a curved steel blade with an ivory handle covered in diamonds and rubies, and it was a gift after an American medical team helped King Ibn Saud with his osteoarthritis in 1950. 2 other items were gifts from the Shah of Iran. All the hilts were encrusted with gems that could be worth $200,000 alone, and the scabbards were made from gold. At around 6:30 a.m. on March 24, 1978, 2 men smashed through one of the windows at the front of the building and went a few paces to the display case. There was only one guard on duty at the time, and he was located at the opposite end of the building. Outside, there was a woman acting suspiciously, and the guard was keeping an eye on her, as it was possible she was up to something. It's possible that she was just a coincidence, or more like a decoy to give the burglars the time they needed. When the guard heard smashing glass and the alarm went off, he went to the lobby, but the door had been chained from the other side. It didn't take long for him to get through, but by that time, the thieves had already gone. It took 45 seconds total for them to make off with the 3 swords and 2 daggers. They left behind shattered glass, but no fingerprints, and nothing for FBI detectives to go on. After the theft, there was little word in criminal circles about the items, leading investigators to believe that the thieves had been hired by a collector of some kind, and weren't looking to fence the items themselves. A more depressing alternative is that the items were melted down and the gems sold individually, in which case it's unlikely any of them will ever be recovered. The FBI still has a reward offered for information leading to the items being found, but so far it remains an unsolved mystery. The FBI files on Benjamin Bugsy Siegel comes to hundreds of pages of official documents and handwritten notes. There's enough there alone to create a book on the famous mobster, but it wouldn't be one with a satisfactory ending, because the ending of Siegel's life is an unsolved mystery and not a case the FBI has been able to bring to a close. Siegel's criminal career started young. While still a teenager, he was part of a gang involved in illegal gambling and car thefts. As he got older, his crimes grew more serious. The money involved rose exponentially, and he got more and more power. He was known primarily as a hitman, but also got involved in bootlegging during the Prohibition and gambling when the Prohibition ended. He was one of the driving forces in the development of the Las Vegas Strip, and the casino and hotel that he operated is still there today. Siegel worked in circles with high-ranking members of various mafia groups, which often got him in trouble with both his peers and law enforcement. At one point, he was arrested and tried for taking the life of another mobster, but was acquitted at the trial. Siegel was one of the first celebrity mobsters, but what really secured his position in folklore was the mystery surrounding his passing. It was June of 1947. He was at his girlfriend's home in Beverly Hills, sat on the sofa reading a newspaper. 9 bullets were fired through a window. 4 hit Siegel, and he passed away at the scene. It was a gruesome sight, and investigators from local law enforcement and the FBI were left with the mystery. There were plenty of reasons the mob might have wanted to take out Siegel. He had put a lot of money into opening the Fabulous Flamingo, his hotel and casino in Las Vegas. That money came from mob leaders who had invested in the project. The project had overrun its budget, and some suspect Siegel was skimming some of the money for himself. In the end, the casino would be more than worth the investment, as it made millions of dollars in the first 6 months of operation. But the concern Siegel might have been messing around with their money may have been too much for some. One reason why there are some doubts to this theory is that it didn't take the form of a natural mob hit. Typically, it was preferred to take out a target when there was little chance of missing, like the back of a car. Attacking from outside of a building through a window left lots of room for error, which was evidenced by the fact that most of the bullets missed Siegel. Either way, this was a very unusual mob hit, or it wasn't done by someone inside the mob. Alternatively, some have suggested that the brother of Virginia Hall, Siegel's girlfriend at the time, may have been involved. Virginia was in Europe at the time of the attack after the two got into an argument. It was known that Siegel would beat Virginia and left her with bruises, which naturally angered her brother, who was in the military. Witnesses heard him and Virginia arguing about this 6 months before the attack, and he said he would take Siegel's life. Whether or not this is a serious threat or just part of the mystery is unknown. Nobody was ever arrested for taking Siegel's life, and the attack remains one of the biggest mob mysteries and one of the FBI's unsolved case files. One of the biggest failures of the FBI happened within its own offices, a crime that wouldn't be solved until long after the statute of limitations expired, and the people responsible came forward. It was 1971. For years, students and political activists had been campaigning against the war in Vietnam. The civil rights groups had been struggling for power. All the time, the FBI was focusing on these groups of what they saw as dissidents. Director J. Edgar Hoover wanted to sow paranoia into these organizations to stop them from attracting new members and cause them to turn on one another. Some of the people in these circles had begun to suspect illegal spying operations by FBI agents. They had come to the conclusion that no amount of marches, protests, or even sit-ins were going to make a difference, and they wanted to bring the FBI's crimes to light. So on March 8th, while most of the country was focusing on the boxing match between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, 8 people broke into an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania, and made off with all of the documents inside. The group was led by Bill Davidson, a Haverford College physics professor who had campaigned against nuclear weapons and the Vietnam War. The group was made up of people he trusted to keep their identities a secret, and who were dedicated to the cause. They decided against targeting the main office, instead choosing a satellite office located in an apartment building in Media. They staked out the office for months ahead of time, learning the routines of the residents and workers inside the building. One of the group took lock-picking classes to prepare. A few weeks before the planned break-in, Bonnie Rains, a member of the group, visited the office undercover. She claimed to be a college student researching opportunities for women within the FBI. Her short visit to the office allowed the group to confirm that there were no cameras or alarms that could trip them. On the day of the break-in, the group had to use a different door than they were expecting, as the lock proved to be too difficult to pick. Other than that, the plan went off without a hitch. They made off with every document and FBI file in the building without alerting anyone. After the break-in, the group searched through the documents, revealing the espionage against US citizens that included many left-wing activists and every black student at one university. The group called themselves the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI, and released documents to the press. It started a wide-scale investigation into the FBI, and caused outrage with the general public. 200 agents were tasked with trying to find the culprits. Most activists in the area were harassed in the months afterward, but nobody had any idea who was behind it. Hoover, who was directly responsible for much of the espionage, was keen to catch the culprits, but he would pass away before the case was solved. The FBI file on the case was closed a few days after the statute of limitations ran out in 1976. One of the 8 members on the team were even in their long list of suspects at the time that the case was closed. Despite knowing they couldn't be charged, the group remained silent. It wasn't until 2014 that some of the group came forward to confirm their involvement and talk about what they did and why. While the case is no longer an unsolved mystery, it definitely remains one of the biggest failures of the FBI. One of the biggest art thefts in history remains an FBI file that has never been solved. More than 30 years on from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum theft in 1990, the FBI has never been able to confirm who was behind the theft or where the works of art are located today. The crime began in an almost comical fashion. It was the night of St. Patrick's Day. 2 men posing as police officers walked up to a side door of the museum in Boston and requested entrance. They said they were responding to a disturbance caused by the St. Patrick's Day celebrations. They were allowed in, where they quickly subdued the 2 security guards, turned off the security cameras, and got to work. A total of 15 paintings as well as other works of art were stolen. The paintings were cut from their frames, which remain on display in the museum today as a reminder of what was lost. At one point, the thieves tried to steal a flag of Napoleon's Imperial Guard, but were unsuccessful and decided to go for a bronze eagle ornament instead. It took just 81 minutes to steal the artwork that would be worth $500 million. It took 2 trips, but the pieces were loaded into a car they had parked at the outside of the building. The guards were left in the museum basement with duct tape over their mouths. It wasn't until the morning, when the day shift guards arrived to find nobody inside, that the police were called and the night shift guards were located. In the years since, the FBI and the museum have offered millions of dollars in reward money for information about where the paintings are today and who was behind the theft, but both remain an unsolved mystery. The FBI has more recently listed a number of people they believe might have been involved, but almost all have since passed away and none were arrested. Decades after the crime, the FBI announced that they were fairly sure of the initial path the paintings had taken, through the Boston mob to Philadelphia. But beyond that, the trail goes cold. In the end, while the FBI is still committed to solving the case, it's likely much of the information is coming too late to definitively solve this mystery. The case of Elizabeth Short, otherwise known as the Black Dahlia, is one of the most infamous unsolved cases in the FBI files. Elizabeth's body was found on a cold January morning in 1947 on a street in Los Angeles. The FBI, for its part, did its role to identify Elizabeth very quickly, but finding the person responsible for her passing has not been as easy. Elizabeth was an aspiring actress who had moved to LA in the summer of the previous year to try to get her big break. In that time, getting roles had proven harder than she had expected, and she was working as a waitress when she disappeared on January 9th, 1947. However, nobody realized she was missing until her body was found 6 days later by a woman walking her child to school. At first, the woman believed the body to be of a mannequin due to how pale it was and how it was posed, but soon realized a horrifying crime had taken place. Elizabeth's body had been split in 2 at the waist, and there was evidence that she had been tormented before her passing. However, there was no evidence this had taken place at the location where the body was found. Instead, she had been cleaned and moved there after her passing. Police sent the FBI scans of her fingerprints, and within an hour, the FBI was able to give Elizabeth her name back. She had previously applied for a role at a US Army base, giving her fingerprints there, and then again when she was arrested for underage drinking a few years earlier. But having the identity of the victim brought the authorities no closer to identifying who was behind this horrific crime. A few days after the crime made headlines around LA, a manila envelope addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner was discovered. Inside were the contents of Elizabeth's purse, including her birth certificate and phone book. Everything had been washed with gasoline. Police tried contacting everyone in the address book for answers, but every lead went cold. They eventually were able to identify the person who had last seen Elizabeth as Robert Manley, a married man that she had been dating who left her at a hotel. He was later questioned by police, but was absolved of any involvement in the crime. Many people have come forward to confess to the crime, but almost all have been proven false. Given this FBI file is now more than 70 years old, it seems unlikely the crime will ever be solved. It will remain a mystery. 20-year-old Kimberly Ann Yohe of Edders, Pennsylvania, was known to locals as a troubled teenager. Kimberly preferred to stay out late with friends, finding any reason to avoid going home. While Kimberly might have been viewed as a problem child, she never had any run-ins with the law, and she was going through patterns of behavior that most young adults do, wanting to see how far they can push their parents' boundaries and rules. Kimberly and her friends would often frequent the Gables truck stop, spending the money that they had earned from work and relaxing together. According to news articles, Kimberly had spent a month in the Army and had worked in security and as a secretary. By all accounts, Kimberly was just trying to navigate the world as a young adult and was trying to find her place. Sadly, in May of 1996, that opportunity was taken away from her, and her case remains one of the FBI's most bizarre unsolved cases. On May 8, 1996, Kimberly's parents said goodbye to their daughter as she left their family home in Edders, not knowing that it would be the last time they would ever see her. When Kimberly failed to return home the next morning, her parents called her friends and were horrified to learn that nobody had seen or heard from her. Kimberly was known to stay out late, but it was unusual for her to not contact anyone. After waiting for Kimberly to walk through the door or for the phone to ring, her parents decided to call the police and report her missing. Not much has been documented in regards to the search for Kimberly, and it's unknown where they searched for her and for how long the search was conducted. On May 22, 1996, investigators had to break the news to Kimberly's family, the news that nobody wants to hear. Kimberly's body had been discovered in the river. Ligature marks were found on her neck, wrists, and ankles, and the investigators promised the Yohe family that they would do everything within their power to find the person responsible. Later that same day, Kimberly's 1987 Mazda 626 was found abandoned at a truck stop along Interstate 81, 22 miles from the river. There are no reports as to whether the car was forensically examined or whether there were any signs of a struggle. The local police immediately launched their investigation, but as the weeks progressed, they found themselves at a dead end. After struggling to find the person responsible, they called in the help of the FBI and the Pennsylvania State Police to investigate. 25 years later, and these organizations are still heavily involved in Kimberly's case. However, we're no closer to the truth. Kimberly's family are desperate for answers and are appealing to anyone with information to come forward and contact the Pennsylvania Crime Stoppers at 1-800-4PA-TIPS or the FBI's Philadelphia office at 215-418-4000. Tiburon, California is a sleepy and peaceful town of around 9,000 residents, located just north of San Francisco. Those who call it home cherish its small town feel while being close to one of the biggest cities, and favor the fact that crime is low. In 2009, that feeling of safety was shattered when reports began flooding into local news and radio stations. 75-year-old Joanne Rosenthal was dealing with the passing of her husband, Ken, after his long battle with Alzheimer's. To help occupy her time, her 2 children and grandchildren visited her, taking her on day trips and doing whatever they could to support her during this difficult time. Those in the local community also extended a sympathetic hand. Those who lived in Tiburon said that it was more like a family than a community, and that Hillary Drive, where Joanne lived, even had its own neighborhood watch. So when reports began flooding in of an incident at the home of Joanne, everyone believed that there had been an accident or a medical emergency. In reality, somebody had attacked Joanne the night before on September 21st, and her body would lay undiscovered until the morning of September 22nd, when her family went to check on her. Upon making this discovery, her family called 911, and within minutes, the Marin County Sheriff's Department had descended upon the scene. Those on Hillary Drive and the surrounding areas were horrified to hear what had happened to Joanne. Everyone around town knew her as a kind, courteous, and warm person who had no enemies and was loved by everyone who met her. During their initial investigation, the Marin County Sheriff's Office found that nothing was missing from the home and ruled out burglary as a motive. A forensic examination of Joanne's home failed to provide any substantial evidence, and 12 years later, the case is still cold. A few weeks into the investigation, the Marin County Sheriff's Office realized that they were ill-equipped to deal with a crime of this magnitude, and called in the help of the FBI. The FBI has since added Joanne's case to their VICAP initiative, and hopes that the right person with the right information will come forward. There are currently no suspects in Joanne's case, and both the Marin County Sheriff's Office and the FBI have failed to come up with a motive. If you have any information, you're asked to contact the Marin County Sheriff's Office at 415-473-7250, or the FBI's Sacramento Field Office at 916-746-7000. In August of 2021, the FBI's Louisville branch declared that they were officially taking over the case of 35-year-old Crystal Rogers, who had been missing since July 3, 2015. Those in Crystal's life described her as a devoted mother who would do anything for her children and would never leave without taking them or arranging care for them. So when she failed to return home on July 3, 2015, her family knew that something was very wrong. 6 years later, Crystal's case is still one of the FBI's biggest investigations in recent times. At the time of her disappearance, 35-year-old Crystal lived with her boyfriend, Brooks Huck, and their 2-year-old son in Bardstown, Louisville, Kentucky. According to Huck, he last saw Crystal on the evening of July 2, 2015. The two said goodnight to each other, and Crystal stayed downstairs, playing on her phone while Huck went to bed. On July 3, 2015, Huck woke up to find that the bed was empty and there was no sign of Crystal or her car anywhere. It wasn't Huck who reported her missing, though. Crystal's family were actually the ones that called the police to report her missing on July 5th after they'd failed to make contact with her. The police launched their investigation, and 2 days later, they made a puzzling discovery. On the side of the Bluegrass Parkway, near mile marker 14, sat Crystal's 2007 Chevrolet. One of the tires was flat, the keys were in the ignition, and her bag and phone were still inside. Had Crystal been driving and gotten a flat tire, she could have been attacked by someone while on the side of the road. But there could also be a more sinister side to this story. Crystal's family seemed to think this is true, and from the get-go, they insisted that Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks, was somehow involved. What's interesting to note is that Brooks's brother, Nick, was a police officer at the time of Crystal's disappearance. He was fired from his position as the department found evidence to suggest that Nick had been tampering with evidence and accounts in Crystal's case. There are also claims of Nick coaching his brother and telling him what to do during the active investigation. Nick isn't the only one from the Huck family who has been tied to the case, and during the investigation of Crystal's disappearance, they uncovered evidence that connected more family members to the case. On the night of July 2nd, 2015, a white Buick was seen lingering outside of the home that Crystal and Brooks shared. Witnesses testified that Anna Whitesides, Brooks's grandmother, had recently bought a white Buick that she had then sold just weeks after Crystal disappeared. Anna's property and the home that Brooks and Crystal shared were forensically examined. However, the findings of these examinations have never been released to the public. In August of 2020, the FBI officially stepped in and took over Crystal's case and began working with the Kentucky State Police and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Kentucky. Since the FBI took over the case, multiple property searches and examinations have taken place, and according to the FBI, multiple items of interest have been collected and sent to the crime lab in Virginia for further testing. As of 2021, Brooks Huck remains the main suspect in Crystal's case, and there's currently a $25,000 reward for information. The FBI is appealing to anyone with information to come forward and contact them on 502-263-6000. In 2004, 28-year-old John Tran made the move from California to Massachusetts to attend Quincy College as a part-time student. John had always wanted to pursue a degree in liberal arts, and after working hard and saving up as much as he could, he was finally able to enroll at the liberal arts program and work towards his dream of being a screenwriter. When John wasn't studying or working on a screenplay, he worked at a local pet supply store and was well known within the college community. He was also well known to the American Red Cross, as he was a frequent blood donor who turned up like clockwork to his appointments to help save other people's lives. Sadly, the same courtesy was not shown towards him, and April 2nd, 2005 marks the last day that John was ever seen alive. He was last seen at a party on Mitchell Street in Randolph, Massachusetts. After that, John was never seen or heard from again, and when he failed to turn up to work and college, he was reported missing. Shortly after his disappearance, the FBI took over the investigation, and 16 years later, they're still no closer to finding John. John's friend, Nguyen, told the press, quote, "It's very difficult because knowing John's out there and not knowing where he's at or what happened to him is very difficult. We need closure, basically." There is a $10,000 reward for information that leads to John Tran, and the FBI is appealing for anyone with information to contact their Boston field office at 857-386-2000. On October 27, 1981, the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office was summoned to the side of Interstate 5, where a passerby had discovered the remains of a young woman. The remains were discovered somewhere between Freeport Boulevard and Pocket Road, and the authorities theorized that they may have belonged to a hitchhiker or a local missing person. However, after scouring missing person reports and making numerous appeals to the public, nobody came forward and the woman remained unidentified. The woman was described as white between the ages of 18 and 30, with dark brown hair and an unknown eye color. Due to the state of her remains, not much could be ascertained, but the coroner was able to establish that her teeth had been well cared for, and that she had a hole in her sternum bone. The coroner had also determined that the post-mortem index was around 5 months, but this information still didn't bring about any leads. A reconstruction of the woman was made and circulated, but nobody came forward. Deputy Paige Neeland told Fox 40 how the case had haunted the department and that they would regularly check for new developments in the case. Then in 2005, the case was handed over to the FBI in the hopes that DNA and further forensic analysis may uncover her true identity. Jane Doe's DNA was entered into the FBI's missing person database, but due to their dismay, there were no results. Her DNA was stored on file, and those who had worked on her case hoped that the future would bring new techniques and renewed hope. William Prendergast of Dallas, Texas, had always wondered what had happened to his 26-year-old sister, Lily. William had last seen his sister in late 1980 when she left the family home after an argument, and has never been seen since. No one in the Prendergast family has ever heard from Lily either. No one thought she was missing and believed that she had gone off to do her own thing, and would be back when she was ready. But as the years passed, William couldn't help but wonder what had happened to his sister. In 2019, William decided to submit his DNA to the FBI, and to his surprise, he received a call in 2020 telling him that they had found his sister. William was notified that the remains found in 1981 were in fact those of his sister, Lily, who was last seen in Dallas in 1980. A sense of devastation and relief washed over him. On the one hand, he was happy to know what had happened to his sister, but on the other hand, he wanted to track down the person responsible. He told Fox 40 News, quote, "Hatred. I wanted to immediately find out who he was and track him down. Who and why? Why would they do such a thing?" Lily is known to have had ties to Florida, Georgia, Ohio, and Texas, and the FBI are appealing for anyone with information to contact their Sacramento field office on 916-746-7000. In September of 2019, 53-year-old Erica Thompson from Brookfield, Illinois, was working as a controller at Empire Hard Chrome Incorporated in Chicago. On the 23rd of September, she had contact with her sister, Dana, by email, but a few days later, she would become the subject of an unsolved FBI case. When Erica didn't show up for work the following week, her family grew concerned as it was out of character for her to miss work without reason. On the 1st of October, her son Michael went to her house to check on her and found that her house's back door was left open, with the air conditioner still running. There were dirty dishes in the sink that had been left there long enough for mold to start forming, causing further concern as she was known to be a neat person. Her family reported her missing that same day, and it was found that her car, a dark purple Nissan Juke, was also missing. An investigation ensued, and police found surveillance footage of Erica driving her car near the Veterans Memorial Circle in Brookfield. When her phone was pinged, it was found that it had traveled through a number of nearby communities, including Bridgeview, Summit, Forest View, Hodgkins, McCook, and Countryside. It was also found that soon after she mysteriously disappeared, her phone was near a tower in Springfield, Missouri. The investigation is being conducted by two suburban task forces, the FBI and Brookfield Police, who hired an organization to aid in the search of waterways near where her phone traveled on the 26th of September. Shipping canals were searched using sonar equipment, and although 12 vehicles were found submerged under the water, none of them matched Erica's. Neither Erica nor her vehicle has ever been found, and the Cook County Crime Stoppers is offering a reward of $1,000 for any information on her whereabouts. Erica is described as 5 foot 6 inches tall, with auburn hair that she dyed on occasion. She has a tattoo of a heart on her foot and of fairies on her hip. Anyone with information on Erica's case is advised to contact the Brookfield Police Department at 708-244-4862. 23-year-old Karen Denise Wells, known by her loved ones as Denise, left her home on the 10th of April, 1994, after leaving her 14-month-old son in her mother's care. She was on her way to meet with a childhood friend named Melissa Shepard in New Jersey, but as she made her way there, she got lost on several occasions. By the evening of the 12th, she was too tired to carry on driving, and decided to check into the Pike Motel in Pennsylvania. She arrived at around 7:30 p.m., and contacted Melissa to meet her at the motel later that same night. Melissa told investigators that Denise sounded exhausted when they spoke on the phone, and so agreed to meet her at around midnight. Denise told her that she was going out to get dinner, and would then be returning to the motel to take a nap before they met up. Just before 8 p.m., Denise asked at the motel's front desk for directions to a McDonald's and climbed into her rental car, a white Plymouth Acclaim, and was seen leaving the motel parking lot, but she never returned and has not been seen since. When Melissa arrived at the motel as planned, she knocked on Denise's door but got no answer. She assumed that she was still asleep, but when she knocked louder and still got no response, she started to worry that something was wrong. She asked the desk clerk to unlock the door, and when they went inside, they found Denise's belongings but no sign of her. When they realized that her car wasn't in the parking lot, Melissa contacted the police department and reported her as a missing person. At around 5:30 the next morning, Denise's car was found 35 miles away in a rural area of Perry County, sitting abandoned in the middle of the westbound lane. Both the passenger and the driver's doors were left open, indicating that she was likely not alone in the car. The car's battery was dead, it was out of gas and covered in mud, suggesting that it had been driven on a dirt road at some point. There was no sign of a struggle, and Denise's change purse was found in a nearby ditch with money still inside. A search was immediately launched, but to no avail, and it was later discovered that she'd driven 700 miles further than she should have, traveling to within 90 minutes of New Jersey before doubling back and driving 3 hours in the wrong direction. Shortly after her mysterious disappearance, Melissa stopped cooperating with detectives, and her disappearance remains an unsolved FBI case. Anyone with information is urged to contact the Pennsylvania State Police at 717-249-2121. The unsolved mystery of the disappearance of 38-year-old Lisa Michelle Stebeck started on the 30th of April, 2007. 4 months earlier, police were called to she and her husband Craig's Plainfield, Illinois home due to a domestic disturbance, but no arrests were made. On the day of her disappearance, she had received papers to have Craig evicted from their home, intended to be the beginning of divorce proceedings. The following morning, Craig contacted their neighbor to ask if he had seen Lisa, and on the 1st of May, the same neighbor reported her missing. Craig told investigators that he believed Lisa had either voluntarily left or was forcefully taken from their home, and that he had last seen her on the 30th after he sent their children to a nearby store on their bicycles. Soon after her disappearance, Craig decided to stop cooperating with police or to aid in the search for Lisa, and he refused to let their children be interviewed by police. When his car was searched, police found biological material belonging to Lisa on a tarp inside the vehicle. He refused to take a polygraph test, and during the investigation, Amy Jacobson, then a reporter for WMAQ-TV in Chicago who was covering the case, was caught on camera at the Stebeck home where she was swimming with Craig and his children, causing her to lose her job. Craig has never been charged in the case, and he maintains his innocence in Lisa's disappearance. Lisa's purse and cell phone have never been located, and there's been no activity on her credit cards since that day that she vanished. Lisa's family has offered a $75,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of the person responsible for her disappearance, and the FBI has asked anyone with information to contact their nearest FBI office. On the 30th of August, 1990, 27-year-old Adam Emery and his wife Elena were with another couple at a seafood stand in Warwick, Rhode Island, where they were involved in a hit-and-run accident that would evolve into an unsolved FBI case. After a car sideswiped the couple, Adam became enraged and decided to pursue the other driver. Elena directed him towards a Ford LTD driven by 23-year-old Jason Bass, as she wrongly believed it was the vehicle that had struck them. Jason was in the car with his cousin, Josh, and one of his friends. When Adam caught up with the car, he started yelling at Jason to pull over, but having no idea what Adam was talking about, he attempted to drive away as he was feeling threatened. Adam managed to pull his car in front of Jason's, and Elena handed him a military weapon, which he used to confront Jason, who tried once more to drive away. Adam, however, grabbed onto the car's hood and used the blade to end Jason's life. In the investigation that followed, paint chips confirmed that it wasn't Jason's car that had caused the accident, and Adam stood trial for murder. Adam maintained that he acted in self-defense, but he was convicted of the crime, receiving bail until his formal sentencing 1 month later. 35 minutes after leaving the courtroom, Adam and Elena traveled to a sporting goods store and bought sweatsuits, socks, and wearable exercise weights. They were next seen eating at a restaurant, and at 4:50 p.m., they were seen next to their car on the Newport Bridge walkway. They returned to the bridge again at 6:53 p.m., and by 7 p.m., the car was found abandoned on the bridge with the engine running and the lights on. Neatly folded clothing was found on the back seat, and in the front, credit cards were found that had been cut in half. A search was conducted below the bridge, but nothing was found until the 30th of August 1994, when remains found in the bay were confirmed to be those of Elena. Adam, however, has never been found, and reliable sources have revealed to the FBI that he may still be alive. He was declared legally deceased in 2004, but he was placed back on the FBI wanted list in 2010, and the investigation into his mysterious disappearance remains ongoing. In August of 2021, 24-year-old Jelani Day was a graduate student at Illinois State University, studying towards his master's degree in speech pathology. On the 24th of August, he mysteriously disappeared, and he was reported as a missing person by his mother the following day. On the 26th of August, his car was found in a wooded area in Peru, Illinois, 60 miles from Bloomington Normal. Police found that the car's license plates had been removed, and over the next few days, some of his personal belongings, including his wallet, clothing, and ID, were found miles away from his vehicle. On the 4th of September, a body was found in the Illinois River, roughly a mile from where Jelani's car was abandoned. On the 24th of September, LaSalle County Coroner Richard Plock confirmed that it was indeed Jelani that had been found, and concluded that he had lost his life due to drowning, but added that the circumstances around the manner in which he entered the water remain unknown. Plock also reported that there was no evidence of trauma to Jelani's body, and that no illegal substances or alcohol were found in his system, adding to the mystery of how he ended up deceased in a river. When Jelani was found, he was wearing a t-shirt, underwear, and had a black sweatshirt tied around his waist, and many questions remain as to why the rest of his belongings were found scattered so far from his vehicle. Jelani was known to be a strong swimmer, since he was part of his high school swim team, and therefore his family finds it highly unlikely that he drowned accidentally. They've since stated that they believe foul play to be involved in his passing, and have received support from his fraternity at Alabama A&M University in petitioning the FBI and state authorities to take exclusive control over the case. After the release of Plock's report, Jelani's mother stated that a narrative was being created that suggested that Jelani had decided to harm himself, and added that this is absolutely not the case. Attorney Ben Crump has echoed her sentiments and also called for the U.S. Attorney General to investigate the case alongside the FBI. Jelani's mysterious FBI case is still being investigated, and for now remains an unsolved mystery. Raja McQueen disappeared in ominous circumstances in June of last year. The FBI and local law enforcement have been working to try to solve her case, but for now it remains unexplained. Raja was last seen at 7:30 a.m. on June 26th. She was spotted on CCTV at a gas station on Harvard Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio, getting into her silver Nissan Sentra. But Raja didn't get into the driver's seat. Instead, there was an unidentified man driving her car. She got into the passenger seat beside him. This was the last time that Raja was seen, but it was not the last time that her car was seen. About 3.5 hours later, the Nissan was spotted at the same location, but driving in the opposite direction. The license plates and hubcaps had been removed, and Raja was noticeably absent from the car. Most disturbing was the 3 bullet holes that were clearly visible, including one on the rear passenger side door. They had not been there earlier that morning. Raja's family tried to report her missing that same day. She was a 27-year-old mother of 2 young boys and a nursing assistant. It was out of character for her to be absent, but because she was an adult, the family was initially turned away. But in the following days, they were able to get police to take the case seriously. After CCTV was pulled up, it seemed obvious that something sinister had happened to Raja. The man who had been driving the car in the second CCTV clip was identified and located. His name hasn't been made public, or what he told police about why he was driving Raja's vehicle. The car itself is still missing. Raja had her phone with her when she vanished, but it was turned off before her family noticed she was missing. The FBI became involved in the case not long after Raja vanished. Phone records have been pulled, and drones and helicopters were used to try to locate Raja or her car, but so far neither have been found. The FBI case isn't a cold case, and police and investigators have been making developments in the case. However, it's a case where a lot of information hasn't been released to the public for one reason or another. The FBI has offered a reward of up to $25,000 for information that could help crack this case. Raja is described as being 5'6", weighing 133 pounds, and has black hair and brown eyes. Information can be passed on to the FBI tip line at 216-583-538. The FBI is investigating the mysterious disappearance of a young woman from Manchester, Georgia, from August of last year. She was last seen walking along the side of a road, and family and friends as well as investigators are stumped about what could have happened to her. Olivia Fowler was a 27-year-old mother of 3 when she vanished. She was very close to her family and adored her young children. There isn't a lot of information known about Olivia's life before she vanished. Even the circumstances of the day before her disappearance remain unknown. What is known is that she left her home just outside of Manchester at about 2 a.m. on August 13, 2021. Whether this was normal behavior for Olivia, or why she decided to make the late-night trip are just some of the unanswered questions that surround the case. She didn't take her phone, driver's license, or handbag with her when she left, and was dressed only in a tie-dye shirt, cut-off shorts, and flip-flops. 8.5 hours later, a Department of Natural Resources officer spotted Olivia walking down Pebblebrook Road. The location was about a 90-minute walk from her home. It wasn't until the following day that Olivia was reported missing. After learning of the Pebblebrook Road sighting, family and friends have searched the stretch of road where she was last seen, but no sign of Olivia has ever been found. A few months after Olivia vanished, the Atlanta division of the FBI became involved in the case. It's not known why the FBI took an interest, as there doesn't seem to be any evidence of a crime that has taken place. However, Olivia's family insist that she wouldn't have disappeared voluntarily. Not only has she missed her own children's birthdays, but her grandmother passed away in the time that Olivia has been missing. Her family believed that there's no way she would have missed the funeral if she could have helped it. There have been a number of sightings and tips called in since Olivia vanished. Investigators have followed up on each one, but each lead has led nowhere. The Pebble Road sighting is the last confirmed sighting of Olivia. Olivia is described as 5'2", weighing 103 pounds. She has blonde hair, green eyes, and a tattoo on her right arm that says "I love you." Anyone with information should contact their local FBI office or Meriwether County Sheriff's Office. In 1966, the town of Menominee Falls in Wisconsin was a safe community without serious crimes. That all changed in November of that year when a disturbing true crime took place. The case of Diane Olkowitz remains unsolved to this day. Diane was 19 years old in 1966. She was one of 6 children and lived with her brother's girlfriend in an apartment close to the family home. After graduating high school, she had gotten a job at a metal stamping plant, where she worked as a secretary. She had worked here for 18 months when the crime took place. Diane's usual evening routine was to finish work at 4:30 p.m. and drive to her friend's place of work to take her home. Diane stayed about an hour later than the other workers at the plant to take calls and any late deliveries. For that hour, she was almost always alone. It was November 4th, 1966 when everything changed. Diane's friend was the first to realize something was wrong when she didn't arrive to pick her up just after 4:30. They tried calling the phone at Diane's work, but nobody answered. In the end, the friend's employer's wife drove to the factory where Diane worked to check on her. The building was locked up, but Diane's car was in the parking lot. They went to the company next door where one of Diane's brothers worked, but he hadn't seen her either. Not long after, a supervisor at the factory arrived. He unlocked the shipping doors. That was when the crime was discovered. Diane had been attacked with a short-bladed weapon. By the time she was found, it was too late. The community was stunned by the attack. Many of the officers had never investigated such a serious crime before. The investigation started immediately, and everyone close to Diane was interviewed. But due to the style of the attack, it was believed that the criminal responsible was someone that Diane knew. Her fiancé was ruled out, as he was in basic training with the army at the time. Police had 6 suspects, but all had alibis. Diane's parents suspected her boss's son. He had made romantic advances in the past, which Diane had rejected. Diane had told her friends that she was creeped out by him, but he too had an alibi. DNA and other evidence was sent to the FBI to try to crack the case. The FBI agents also couldn't make any progress. Over the years, the case has remained open, but police and the FBI have come no closer to solving it. When DNA testing advanced, though, the evidence was again run through databases, including the FBI's CODIS system, but there was no match. By this point, the man Diane's family had suspected had already passed away, but investigators still wanted to rule him out. DNA was taken from his parents, but there was still no match. With every new year, new technology is developed. It's hoped that one day police might be able to solve the case, but for now it remains unexplained. Almost 20 years have passed since Laverta Sorrell vanished without a trace. She disappeared from Fort Defiance on the Navajo Reservation, and her case became an FBI file as FBI agents tried to get answers. Laverta was 44 years old on July 4, 2002. She was married and had 3 children who lived with her sister. She lived in Navajo, New Mexico, but worked for the Window Rock School District in Fort Defiance, Arizona. It was here that she was last seen, but it wasn't a typical workday for Laverta. Laverta spent the evening with her husband at a restaurant for their anniversary. Between 11 and 11:30 p.m., he drove Laverta to her place of work and dropped her off. It was the last time anybody would ever see Laverta. Usually, she would call her sister every day. They were very close, and it was immediately concerning when that phone call didn't come. 4 days after she vanished, her family reported her missing to the authorities. Progress was slow due to complications over who had jurisdiction to investigate the case. But eventually, the local FBI office took over the investigation. Still, there was little evidence to go on. As in many cases, there are a number of pieces of information known to authorities that haven't been made public. It's not known how many of the unanswered questions surrounding Laverta's case are really unanswered, but the most important, where she is, remains unknown. When Laverta's family spoke on the case, they revealed that they didn't know why Laverta would want to be dropped off at her place of work so late at night. This wasn't the norm for her, and her job wouldn't require her to urgently drop everything to solve an issue at 11:30 p.m. It's possible she was there to meet someone else, which would also answer the question of how she intended to get home if she expected this other individual to have a car. Of course, these questions all assume Laverta wanted to be there in the first place. The circumstances of her disappearance are definitely suspicious, and authorities are still seeking information that could lead to answers. Laverta was described as being 5'1", weighing 110 pounds with black hair and brown eyes. She also wore glasses. The FBI has offered a $10,000 reward for information on the case. The FBI's Albuquerque office can be contacted at 505-889-1300. When Margaret Hart disappeared after leaving her home on foot on September 5, 1979, her family wasn't too worried. She had disappeared for short periods of time before. Her boyfriend filed a missing persons report the following day, but most who knew her expected Margaret would turn up soon. 4 days after she was last seen, 4 teenagers discovered her body on military property near her home in El Paso, Texas. The circumstances surrounding Margaret's case are very strange. When the teenagers first discovered the body, they thought it was that of a man. Military investigators started the case, looking into whether the individual had any connection to the nearby base. It was then realized that the body belonged to a woman. Fingerprints were taken and matched those on a police database, and Margaret was identified. The FBI took over the case when it was realized that the victim was a civilian. Margaret's loved ones had already contacted authorities about the discovery. The description of the body and the clothes that they were found nearby had made them think of her. The shirt with the phrase "Keep the Magic" embroidered on it was also what Margaret had been wearing when she left the house. Margaret had been 25 when she disappeared. She'd had surgery on her knee a few months earlier and still had limited mobility due to it. According to her boyfriend, Brian Robinson, she had left on foot to go to a pharmacy and pick up a prescription. In the missing person report, it mentioned that Margaret would sometimes hitchhike. The strangest part about the case was the state of her body. Before Margaret was identified, police estimated she had passed away 2 weeks earlier. While it was a hot environment and slightly warmer weather than usual for that time of year, that wouldn't have accounted for the advanced stages Margaret was found in if she'd only gone missing a few days earlier. After Margaret was identified, the case went cold and has remained that way for more than 40 years. The FBI has recently campaigned to finally solve this cold case. More information is needed before that can happen, though. Anyone with any information should call the FBI El Paso office at 915-832-5000. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.